Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Brendan O'Reilly. I'm the president of the Press Club of Long Island, which is a chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. Tonight's discussion is on AI in newsrooms and how AI in general will hurt and help journalism. Our moderator tonight is Jeff Bessen, who is the treasurer of the Press Club of Long Island. And I will let him introduce the panel. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, Brendan. Good evening, everybody. So tonight we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, and we have three very good panelists to do that. First, Jay Allred is the co-founder of Lede AI, an artificial intelligence startup developed inside a local newsroom. Lede AI builds reliable, easy-to-use automation tools for newsrooms informed by the needs of the readers, journalists, and communities. He was a 2022 Salzburger Fellow at the Columbia Journalism School and got to see more, where his project focused the development of easy-to-use SaaS tools for local newsrooms around the globe. Nikita Roy is a Knight Fellow at the International Center for Journalists. Nikita Roy is a data scientist, journalist, and Harvard-recognized AI futurist, and she focuses on AI literacy in the news industry. She also leads the AI journalism lab at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, City University of New York. And also joining us is Zach Richner, who's a managing partner of Allred Ventures and also has some impact in the Herald Community newspaper newsroom. Zach is the founder and managing partner of Allred Ventures, a media for equity venture capital firm that works with thousands of local media outlets across the United States to provide startup local media organizations investors with unique and outsized value. First of all, thank you very much to all the three panelists for joining us tonight. So let's get started with AI has been the hot tech tool since it was unleashed publicly in November of 2022. So I just want to start off with Zach in a way, because as deputy editor of Herald Community Newspapers, we've been using AI since it's been introduced in some fashion. Zach, why did you think AI would be good use in our newsroom?
Yeah, well, first, thank you to the Press Club of Long Island for having us. Really excited to be on this panel. I think that AI will be game-changing for lots of industries, including the local news industry. And the way that, I think it can be most effective in a newsroom is by freeing up journalists to do what I think they really want to do, which is go out in the field, talk to human beings, and do the type of investigative reporting that a lot of journalists are passionate about. And to do that, it means freeing up time instead of writing or rewriting press releases or spending an exorbitant amount of time on pagination. That's something that AI can really do to free folks up to do more of what they want.
Jay, working in the newsroom that you work in, is that what you've been using it for, to free up reporters? Is that like a truism now? Is that becoming accurate, that we have more time to do?
That's a question for me?
Yes.
Yeah. The way that we've deployed it mostly is in a way that it's reporter and newsroom led. So what we've kind of done is build out an experimental team in ways that we're able to kind of create feedback loops around, I tried this, I learned this, I'm going to try this next, is really the methodology that we're employing. What we're finding is that it's really useful for, and these tools have been around for a while, but our staff loves it for meeting transcriptions or recording transcriptions. They love that feature. We've found that tools like DALL-E, especially DALL-E, the current version, are really useful for creating representational art for stories that the choice was either going to be crappy stock art, no art at all, or much, much better representational art for features. They like that. That's been good. We've had folks that have found it to be incredibly useful as an assistive tool for headline writing, caption writing, all of the SEO stuff that journalists hate doing, but it's really important to get their stories out in front of. So SEO descriptions, tagging, all of those things have all proven to be things that our team has looked at and adopted in ways that they've led that adoption. What we've tried not to do is make this into a top-down situation. And obviously, with my involvement in Lede AI and my interest in the topic and my leadership of the organization, it would have been very easy to make this top-down thing. And we've tried to be pretty intentional about making it something that everybody's participating in, and it's really led by the newsroom. That's how we're using it now.
For the uninitiated that may not know, let's define what AI is. According to some definition I found, it's the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and translation between languages. Nikita, is that a decent definition, or is there so much more to AI that you've been finding as you're through your work?
When you say artificial intelligence, really there's so many different components to that. It's multiple different subsets to that, and generative AI is actually a subset of a subset, really, employing machine learning techniques. And there are so many things. I mean, Jez has been working in AI from before generative AI, which was a subset of AI that he was using to write sports articles. And there's so many different ways in which actually one thing that I think a lot of us in the news industry might not realize is that we've been using AI for over a decade. The Associated Press back in 2014 started using their natural language generation, which is a subset of AI that uses to write their financial corporate earnings report, taking it from almost 300 to 3,000 earnings report that they were able to cover every quarter. And that's been in use for over a decade. Now, that's a different form of AI, and it's not generative AI. But the difference with specifically Gen AI is the fact that, as you were saying, the ability for computer systems to do a human task before required you to be able to code and instruct a computer how to do that in a particular language. Now that language is just plain English, which means it's extremely accessible for anybody to go and be able to do all of these commands. If you open ChatGPT now, you can put in a data sheet, and just with a single line of plain English text saying, what are the top performers in this particular area or something like that, or top sales, you're able to get those insights, which previously would require somebody to go and code it up. And that's really the difference with Gen AI. It's making it more accessible because it's reducing the technical barriers for somebody to enter the field of AI and adopt it. And that's why I think it's actually a huge win for news and local news, especially, who might not have a huge technical team to be able to support a lot of the AI tasks. Maybe it's, if you know how your business works and you're able to implement those frameworks with AI, and Gen AI is able to give you that extra, I would say, superpower in a way to be able to do tasks that previously required you to code.
When what should, for anybody, and everybody can answer the question when they want to, what should we first understand about AI for people that are just starting to use it? So
I could take for Gen AI, what it really means. Specifically, generative AI is all it is prediction of words. It has been trained on everything that's out there in the internet. These are huge large language models that are powered. It's basically a prediction engine. It just predicts what the next word is. And it doesn't really have a sense of knowledge, I'd say. Because if you are using it as Google, which is the first thing I say, like, never use these basic ChatGPT tools as Google, because at the back, the technology is only working as a prediction engine. I call them language generators, and they're not necessarily knowledge generators. And that's where, like, the work of the humans, the journalists, come into play, because we're working on the knowledge aspect of it. That's one of the first things to wrap your heads around. How does generative AI work? What's really powering all of these ChatGPT tools? Because it's just not magic. It's that prediction's going on behind.
And Zach, when you first wanted to introduce, and we talked about AI in our newsroom, what did you want us to understand first about it?
I think the most important thing was that this was a, not to sound like a broken record, but it was a revolutionary tool that was now available, as Nikita said, to the layperson that didn't need to know how to code. And because of that, there were so many different applications, whether it is summarizing stories or even practicing interviews, so role playing for an interview, or suggesting sources, or enterprise series ideas. So that's just on like the content side, but even on the graphic side with Dolly, and there's just so much that can be done, that I think we're really just scratching the surface right now. As much as there is out there, it's just really scratching the surface.
Do you feel that way, Jay? Is your newsroom more into it? I mean, what was first the feeling like when you first introduced the use of it?
I think like from when you'd ask the question is like, what should people know about, what's the one thing people should know, or what's the first thing that people should know? And the thing that I usually start with when I'm asked to talk about this is that the development of this technology across all industries is now inevitable. This train has left the station and it's not going to come back. In fact, because I've been working in the field for a long time, I mean, like 2018 means I've been working in the field for a long time. I mean, but the train left the station in 2018. We just didn't know about it. Like the average person who wasn't like weirdly interested in this didn't know that the train had left the station. And so where I like to start with folks is like, let's just sort of understand that this is going to affect all of our lives in lots of different ways. It's totally natural that it feels disorienting, and sort of on one day it's going to feel magical, and on another day it's going to feel, oh, that's weird. Like, you're at the top of the roller coaster and you're about to go, take the ride. But if you can kind of get to a place where that this is going to be general purpose technology across in all aspects of our lives in lots of different ways, it makes it a little easier, frankly, to say, okay, I'm going to try to understand this. And I try to break it down into really small steps. And in our newsroom, that's the way that we looked at it, Jeff, was to just go, you do not have to use this for everything. Use it for one thing and try it for one thing. And if it sucks at that and you hate it, that's also good information. Like, negative feedback is feedback. I mean, like, negative experiences are experiences. Challenging experiences with technology are experiences, and that's okay. They're still valuable, and you can still learn from them. It's okay to take one step at a time. I think that the thing that you can't do with this is assume that it's going to go away, or assume that it's going to be a fad and it's not going to be transformational. It's one of those sort of general purpose technologies that it's just here, and like the train's not turning around. So best to try to get on it, or at least understand where it is.
Well, to bolster your point, I saw a article today, everybody. Nearly 70% of newsroom staffers from a variety of backgrounds and organizations, they were surveyed in an AP study. They're using the technology for creating social media posts, newsletters, headlines, translation, and transcribing interviews and story drafts. And 1/5, they use it, generative AI, for multimedia, social graphics, and videos. So obviously it's here. Like a lot of things that we all know become institutionalized, they're here to stay. So the best way, I guess, let's maybe, if not talk to people that are just not using it yet or just starting to use it, everybody, while we talk about like people that are using it or not understand it, is there anything that we should look at it the right way, the wrong way? Is there a perception? Because some people might say, some person said to me in the newsroom one time about the integrity of story writing. And it was an older person. And I said, this other person's going to be working in the field now 40 years, one of our newsroom youngsters. So this is a tool they're going to be using. So how should we go about anybody that's outside, in a way, looking in now from AI? How should we perceive this, besides going forward? How fearful? Is it a wrong way or right way to look at it?
Yeah. So, I think that the very first step for a lot of people is simply set up a ChatGPT account. There's a lot of people that still don't have that. And I think the first thing after you have that account is just play around. It doesn't have to be work related. Just play around and see what this technology can do. And as Jay said, negative feedback is feedback. So there will be things that you think are really great and really cool, and then there'll be things that you find that this ChatGPT is not so good at. But the very first step for somebody that might be hesitant about this is just play around. It doesn't have to be work related at all. Just find a reason to talk to this computer, which I know is probably a bit disconcerting, but I think you'll very quickly understand what this can and can't do, and also gain comfort in doing it.
I mean, from my perspective, I think I see two dominant emotions when I work with newsrooms and when we talk to newsrooms about AI. And the two dominant emotions are fear and suspicion. Now, there's a third one that's coming in, which is curiosity, but for many, many years, it's basically been fear and suspicion. And if you work in a big corporate news chain, there's reason for both of those emotions, because the way that decisions and the way that the economy has kind of unfolded on the newspaper industry over the last several decades, the deployment of technology has not always been great for journalists. And I think that our job, if we're going to advance this technology, is to really think about, accept that the development of the technology is going to happen, that the control that we have over it, though, is the way that we deploy it. And the contrast I would usually draw with this would be the way that we initially dealt with the platforms in the early 2000s. And, before these things became ascendant and all of a sudden we sort of were at their beck and call, we have an opportunity at this point to really think about how do we want to deploy this technology in service of communities and newsrooms. I think we have an obligation as leaders to learn our lesson from some of the experiences that we had with the platforms. And there's cause for optimism because we're really early and we're good at this kind of thing as an industry. ChatGPT is principally a word thing right now. It's principally a language thing. This is what we do for a living. So we're actually positioned in a way that we have an opportunity to really think about how we're going to deploy it.
And I just want to add on to Zachary's point about how we should just start using ChatGPT. I do a lot of AI trainings and go into newsrooms and all of these panels, and I always usually start off with a survey, and about 40% have never tried ChatGPT of the people. And this is now over quite a few over 1,000 journalists that have been taking the survey, and that's all around 40% have never tried ChatGPT. And usually the first step is I'm exploring and getting them to try out ChatGPT and see what are the different use cases. So that would be the first thing. Try out, get a ChatGPT account, and then think through different tasks in your day, maybe, of how it could help you out. And for a week, just constantly keep that tab open. Maybe you're drafting sort of like an email, you're not sure how to say something. There are a lot of, just apart from work, maybe different personal tasks in your daily life that you're able to explore ChatGPT with. On the Newsroom Robots podcast, I tend to always ask guests at the the end. How are they using it in their own personal daily life? And that's where you get a lot of use cases. So a lot of guests have said that they use ChatGPT to write bedtime stories for their kids, and use their creativity over there. I've had one guest, Francesco Marconi, talk about how he's used AI and generative AI tools like ChatGPT for like scenario planning, which is extremely important for like somebody at like an executive level position as he is. I've had Nick Diakopoulos talk about how he's been using it to teach himself Dutch when he was in Amsterdam. And so like all of like these different like personal use cases that you then see, it's just beyond just news. And so if you just think through your day and see, can AI help me out with this? And then you will see it fails or it's really good at it. And you need to know what the bad and good use cases are, but we won't have a collection of that until you're trying them out. And especially with Gen AI, this field is still developing. It's very quickly, rapidly developing, and it's still relatively in its infancy stage compared to a lot of the other subsets of AI. And so if you are doing something, you'll probably be one of the first in this area. So if you are like an investigative journalist and you're exploring Gen AI specifically for investigative journalism, it's a very nascent stage. So you can get in and get onto the train right now before it leaves, and you'll be one of the first people in that area.
Some of the questions that have popped up in the Q&A are, I could say, a little bit more interesting than maybe some of the questions I have. So first off, so would each of the panelists give a specific actual example of how AI was used in the process of the creation of an article or a news story? And where and how did AI get used in the process?
Sure, I can go. In our newsroom, we have about 10 people that are in our newsroom, and our most enthusiastic adopter of AI is the person that you would least likely think it was. He's the self-described curmudgeon in the newsroom. He's got more seniority than anybody else, and he describes ChatGPT as the best intern that he's ever had. Just wants nothing more than to make him happy, is available, just beck and call, and doesn't get mad when he curses at it. You know, like it's just like he's very funny. But in his case, he uses it all the time to rewrite leads or to give him another version of a lead. So he also will describe himself. He's like, over 35 years, this is almost a direct quote, I've discovered that I really love reporting, but I don't like writing that much. And so he will write a lead, and he will then paste the lead or the first 3 or 4 graphs into ChatGPT and say, rewrite this for me in a brighter tone and make sure that it's SEO optimized. And ChatGPT will give him something back that he will decide as an experienced journalist what parts of it that he likes and what parts that he doesn't like. And he'll ask it to do it again until he gets something that he feels like, as an editor, he's got what he needs in order to use back into the story. That's typically how we're seeing, especially Gen AI used in our newsroom, is that it's just sort of that immediate, instant brainstorming assistant that helps you kind of solve the problem of a blank page. I've also seen it used where a journalist is working on a particular topic. So give me 5 story ideas for economic development related to chip manufacturing in Central Ohio now that Intel has announced their expansion of a chip manufacturing plant. And ChatGPT will come, or AI will come back with some ideas that help that journalist think through. And Nikita's right, like the more that you talk, like the more that you ask follow-up questions, this is very natural for journalists. Don't stop with the one question, turn it into a conversation and ask follow-ups. That's how you can hone down, and that's where I've seen it used in our newsroom.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the applications in a newsroom are myriad. I mean, it's so Jay talked about story ideas. So I know in the Herald newsroom, something we're trying to get back to is more enterprising stories. So you can type into Chat GPT, and that's just one of many that are out there. Chat GPT by OpenAI, but that's the one I use mostly. And you say, we are a local news organization on Long Island. You give it a little background. That's really important, is to provide it with background. And then, we want to do a series of 6 stories. What are some ideas? And then it'll spit out a couple of ideas. Okay, so now the next step is something we're doing now is on nuisances, public, just daily nuisances, so that's a story idea it shares, and we say, well, what are some examples of that we might be able to cover if we wanted to do a 6-part series. And the first one might be noise pollution, the second one might be light pollution. I mean, and these are very basic examples, things that you could probably come up with on your own. But then it's okay, let's do noise. If we're doing noise pollution, give me an example of three subject matter experts that I might want to reach out to. And it gives, sometimes by name, but usually more in generalities, like you should talk to this type of professor or this type of engineer. And then you say, well, okay, can you role play? You be the that engineer, and I'm going to be the reporter. Help me role play to practice for that interview. Then you write this, I won't kind of repeat some of what's been said about writing, but the actual story, or helping to write this story. But something that Newsday does really well is they summarize the story in 3 bullet points. I think that's a really user-friendly feature of what Newsday does. And you can, after you're finished writing the story, you can put it into Chat GPT and say, please pull out the 3 key takeaways and of no more than 15 words each. So that's, I ran through a lot of different examples right there in one story, from kind of ideation to publishing, and everything in between.
Okay, sorry, Nikita, go ahead.
I was just going to add a few more things to both of them. Some of the first use cases that I've seen newsrooms use a generative AI for has been with like SEO metadata, using it for their headlines. There's a free Slack tool called YesEO, where you're able to just put in your news article, and then it could suggest your headline ideas and SEO metadata. But apart from that, there's also like a lot of different ways, maybe like brainstorming your different story angles. For the writing purposes, you have your entire article. Now you need to get your summaries. You want to get bullet points. Maybe you want to check if is this too complex of an article? If you are talking about something technical, if it would be, you can have a conversation with ChatGPT and get it to think. If you're writing something for, like, say, an immigrant or somebody who is like not so familiar with these technical legal concepts, maybe is this something that a layperson would be able to understand? Like all of those kind of like make it role play, just as Zachary was saying, like make it role play and get it to see how would your audience be able to understand this particular article. Is there a way in which you could simplify the language better or rewrite certain stuff? But apart from that, there's also just a lot more sides on the research component, I would say. With ChatGPT Plus, you're able to upload a PDF and then have a conversation with it and chat with it. So now if you're a reporter, you have like multiple different PDF files, or like a huge report has come out and you want to get the key insights and see what could be a story out of this, you can upload a PDF file and have a conversation with it. You can also, as I was saying previously, upload data. So upload an Excel file, have a conversation with that. We have so many open data sets in our city. Just go and drag out all of that public data, upload it onto Microsoft Excel. There is no privacy concern, nothing, because it's open data, and have a conversation with it. Like for New York City, I often talk about this, is like when I just like when last year when ChatGPT came up with its new feature. It's called advanced data analysis. And I took out all of the traffic vehicle collisions, and I could just go step by step and ask which boroughs had the highest number of like accidents, when were the accidents happening. And within a 10-minute conversation, I was able to figure out that there's this one particular geolocation that was having accidents, the most number of accidents during this particular period, and it was all happening late at night, completely contradictory to the rest of the pattern of the city. And that's like instantly able to find some sort of like anomaly in a data pattern, and it was just a conversation with ChatGPT. And so like there's a lot of parts in the research component that we can get into, and I think that's where the real power, especially of generative AI, is.
Okay, thank you very much. Couple of questions circle around the fact that they feel if we're copy and pasting some information, and may all sound the same and it still needs a human touch. Just as a personal note, using AI for certain things, sometimes it generates certain, almost like a couple of paragraphs of the same words. So when we're using AI, especially for journalism, and we want to write a story, how much editing have you guys found that it needs at this juncture, depending on which one you're using, ChatGPT or some other AI program? How much editing does it need? How much human touch does it really need?
Excuse me. I think that there's no scenario at the moment where it's a pure copy and paste at all. I would certainly read everything, fact check. There's still a lot of hallucinations. I think in the future it will be to the point where you probably could copy and paste, leaving aside some of the implications to the workforce and the journalistic integrity, but we are certainly not there yet. So definitely reread everything, check your facts, and really use it as a tool as a supplement and not as a replacement.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
agree with Zachary completely on that. It is not all of our testing around generative right now is that we cannot find a single application where it is a set it and forget it kind of an application. And I wanted to highlight something Nikita said early in the conversation around there are lots of different subsets of what AI is right now. I mean, AI is just kind of a term now that has been generalized, like it used to be Xerox. I'm going to go Xerox this. Well, what you mean you're going to photocopy it, but okay. And there are lots of tools that, like, for example, the AP has been using for years and years and years, like natural language generation that's highly templated, that is extremely reliable because you know exactly where the variables are going to go in and you know exactly what the sentence structure is going to be. But the AI that's available to us now that's generative, I would never recommend anyone going in a full copy paste mode on that at all. And it might be a while before we get there.
And I don't think the best use case for it right now is to write stories. If you're looking to write those automated stories, natural language generation is the way to go. What generative AI is really good at right now is probably repurposing content. So you have this article that your journalists have written, you have to put it into 10 different ways for 10 different platforms, you know? That's where generative AI could really help you. Summarizing, getting your social media scripts, posts, all of those different ways. That's the power of language that you could use from generative AI.
Yeah, to plus one on that, there's a tool that's really popular in a lot of newsrooms now called Canva. Most of us probably on this call know about Canva, and they've got some really interesting things that they've released over the last year around taking a story and creating an Instagram story for that, and using Gen AI to be able to sort of read the content that you need to repurpose into social media stories or Instagram reels that are unique and informational and help bring your stories and your journalism to places where people are, but not having to go in and create those things manually. So there's a lot of like sort of interesting off-brand uses for some of these things that can help us as journalists bring our journalism to places where people are.
So, being that we touched on the fact that, like you said, Jay, you have a person in your newsroom who's using it to generate headlines, and we're using it to generate headlines in our Herald newsroom stuff. One of the questions was about they feel like it's dulling their skills as a journalist. So, what can we tell journalists that they should be using the AI, and now they have X amount more time to do what? What should they be doing? Investigating, getting out there, talking to people. What should they be? How they can, like, I guess, mix and match these skills to be a better journalist.
I feel journalism is really like one-on-one is that connection that we have with our communities and being out there and reporting. And what could generative AI could really be helpful for now is speeding up the process to getting stories out there and spending less time maybe behind your desk writing these stories and doing all of those extra tasks like, the SEO and like all the social media posts and everything else, getting people out there in the communities more, so newsrooms are able to have a deeper connection and more meaningful connection with their audience. That is going to be extremely crucial in as we advance more into generative AI, because news needs to have that personal connection with audience, and we'll be able to do that by having reporters out there. So I see journalism is fundamentally the reporting aspect of it, creating those connections, being out there in the community, and the writing component, depending on the types of stories. Like if you're writing a feature article, I would say that's more like writing heavy and stuff. But like there's a line, in my opinion, based on like how much of a journalist's job is the reporting versus writing.
And I think Nikita's spot on here. And part of getting out in the community is also source development and having time to meet with the superintendent or meet with your state senator. Things that everyone knows is important, but usually gets put at the bottom of the pile and folks never get to. So just having the freedom to strengthen relationships, whether that is with the general public or with elected officials, I think it just goes a tremendously long way in better reporting. And as Nikita and Jay have said, reporting and writing are not necessarily overlapping.
So the idea comes across. We're using AI to create things. Maybe many of us look at it as another tool, the same way we used a computer, the same way years ago we used a recorder, whatever. But should we be transparent if we're using AI to create certain content that people think that maybe it's part of the byline story, maybe it's part of the editorial board editorial, maybe it's part of somebody's op-ed? How transparent should we be? Should we be writing a disclaimer about using AI when we create stories, news stories?
I mean, I can start. I think that transparency is really key in this, particularly where we are right now. In our own newsroom and in the newsrooms with which we work, we strongly recommend that they create like an author bio around, like, so if we're generating an LG story for them, we want that author to read something like Auto News Desk, and we want that author's bio to explain exactly what the tool is and what it's used for. We disclose a lot when we're using AI in terms of how it was used as an assistant. I think right now more transparency is the way to go, rather than less transparency. And you'll see that those news organizations that have deployed AI for content production, particularly, and have not disclosed effectively to their audience and have not shared with their audience why they're doing it, this is where the problems come in, right? Because it's this opportunity for you to actually build trust by just being really transparent and open with your audience around why you're using the tool, what you're using the tool for, what you're not going to use the tool for. This is an opportunity to walk into that and bring your audience along with you so that they understand where they are and they feel very oriented and clear on what they're reading and where it was built. This is something that we as journalists have always had strong ethics and strong codes of ethics. I think just leaning back into those strong codes of ethics is a great place for us to start. And the folks at places like Trusting News and other places are doing a lot of work right now, and a lot of really good work around helping news organizations. Pointer's doing this as well, around helping news organizations get their handles around, kind of get their arms around, if we're going to use this, what are going to be the guardrails that we're going to set up for ourselves, and how are we going to tell our readers about it. I would strongly recommend that.
One good thing that I'm seeing a lot of newsrooms are starting to have is have an open AI ethics policy, and having that open to their audience to see how journalists are being instructed to use AI, what they can and can't do. And I think that's one good step to go ahead with, just to give that disclosure to audience as well, because there's also different ways in which AI is being used in your newsroom, like all the way from like transcription, maybe translation, and there are so many different use cases that are going on in their entire reporting process that is powered by AI. And so there's like one way in where you can like have a conversation and talk to your audience basically through that AI ethics policy of like, this is how we are looking at AI, thinking about using it or not. And there are so many examples, all the way from like BBC has put out a bunch of different their AI ethics policy, The Guardian. There's so many examples for you to see on how you can draft something for your own newsroom.
Yeah. I don't think at this point there's a right answer, but I think there are wrong answers on how to do it. Just to reiterate, transparency is key I think when it comes to writing, but there are different processes and steps leading to that writing where, if it's helpful, I don't know if it's necessary to disclose. If it helped you to practice for that interview, or come up with the story idea, like, I don't think that is something that needs to be disclosed. The same way that, if you are using Google to do a search, like that has just become a tool in the kit. But when it really comes to putting words on paper or words on screen, I think then that's where the transparency is definitely key.
So another question came up with talking about ethics and everything is, does anybody see the danger of AI creating more plagiarists? And of course, we had a couple, many famous ones about 20 odd years ago in the New York Times newsroom with Jason Blair, and the New Republic with Stephen Glass and several others. Does anybody see a fear with AI doing that? Once again, I guess, how do we check that?
I mean, I guess I would say that it's definitely is a concern that we should be on the lookout for, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons on this, and that technology, it's a continuum, and just like probably Google made it much easier for plagiarists to get away with it, or to try to trick people. So as the tools improve for the good actors, it also makes the bad actors more malicious. I think part of what the not just the journalism industry, but all industries right now are dealing with is what tools can be put in place with the same power that the AI has to figure this out, and to unveil some of the, in this case, plagiarists. And I think we're still waiting for that. It's going to be really interesting to see what some of the fact checking and integrity tools come out in the next, I think we're moving so quick, next couple months, and then in the years that follow.
Okay.
I tend to be not terribly optimistic about this in terms of the challenges that we're about to face as an industry over the next couple of years, because I've seen it happen inside of small communities where you've got organizations that have spun up 1,500 sites that look like local news sites, and they're the Santa Fe Recorder, and they are basically content farms that are paid for by specialists, and they just I mean, they impersonate, for all intents and purposes, they're impersonating local journalists, and they're purporting to be reputable local news organizations, and they're not. I mean, I have one operating in my market right now. And so this is personal for us because of the journalists that we employ and the work that we do and the community engagement work that we do. So I think that as an industry, we're going to face this because there's money to be made, and this is a tool in which you can accelerate. You can accelerate the effectiveness of a good actor, and you can accelerate the effectiveness of a bad actor. Fire can keep you warm, and it can also burn down your home. And I just think that we have to be vigilant as leaders in the industry around deployment of the technology. And I think being open with each other and having conversations like this and taking questions and being part of that and involving each other in the dialogue is going to be really important.
What happened there?
I think we lost Jay.
Whoops, hope he comes back. As we have continuing, Nikita, I guess this would be somewhere in your ball court as far as media literacy. What are we going to be teaching people? What should we be teaching people going now and going forward about the difference between, I guess, original creation, accurate creation, as opposed to, in Jay's back, compared to what, maybe there is some false production out there of facts or misinformation.
Yeah, I think going journalism schools, we're going to see the curriculums sort of change, or maybe new courses come up, and people thinking about how to incorporate components of AI literacy into it. One initiative I'm part of at CUNY, and I know a lot of other journalism schools are thinking around how to incorporate AI literacy and educate their students about the basics of AI, because I think for us as journalists, we need to know and be very informed of AI for two reasons. First of all, we need to be one of the most informed citizens so that we can inform our audience about it. And the second is because it has a lot of transformative potential of all of the examples that we were talking about. What I think is going to be it's going to be very difficult for that AI generated content farms to deal with all of that issue. But the only way I think we as a news industry could maybe combat it is by having a personal connection with our audience. And that's where AI is going to be coming in. AI will be helping you to, again, reach more audience, repurpose your stories so that you can be on TikTok and Instagram at the same time, as well as on Facebook, which is just like all of these different places that you need to be. And then also then get your reporters to be out in the community more. So building that direct connection with our audience, that's the way to go, because AI generated farms are going to be there, and journalism schools are going to be thinking a lot more about, I would say, how to teach their students. And they are thinking a lot more right now about how do they teach their students about AI. And it all actually starts with the professors at the journalism schools, also getting more aware about how do they use these tools. I'm seeing a lot of professors right now, they don't have to be teaching AI, but they're incorporating that into their courses. Maybe they're teaching something, their first year journalism course, and they're teaching them about interviewing skills. And then, just as Zachary was saying, they're doing these like demos with ChatGPT and getting their students to practice their interviewing skills, the type of questions that they could ask, and getting them to think through that and critically think through all of those questions or ways in which it could help them. So the different ways in which it brings, professors are looking into it. There's also the other side the professors are very worried about, is getting them to just write an article that ChatGPT could do, and then their assignments are done, and then how do they know whether that's AI or not, and that there is no good AI detection tool out there in the market. So another way in which I'm seeing professors deal with that, and I talk about a lot, is kind of getting them to do a lot of the components that require that like human input. Like you're getting them to go out there, report, show their entire work of how they're getting the story, and then asking them to, prompt with ChatGPT and show me your entire chat history of how you're having the conversation. I think as journalists, What I'm seeing, and I just got this question last night as well, and I was like, and they were like, how do I have this conversation? Because I'm pretty sure they will use ChatGPT because I know the ChatGPT was. And I was like, one thing we have to be talking to our journalists about and students, whoever might be using these, is that it's okay to use generative AI. I use generative AI tools all the time to like help me rewrite certain stuff and with my work, and a lot of people are. So if you have that conversation with saying it's okay to use ChatGPT, but as journalists, transparency is one of the key components of ethically using AI, and we need to be transparent with our editors and with our professors about how that AI component has been used, and they're not getting penalized for that in a way. What it would be instead is you are taking all of your reporting processes or all of the knowledge you've gotten, and then you're prompting with it. You have your entire way of which you have written an article, and then you're having a conversation to get AI to help you to do something better. That's the good way to use. If you just went and asked ChatGPT to write an entire article for you, that's the wrong use case. And we need to have open conversations of what are the good and bad use cases of AI, and why is the other one a bad use case of AI? Because of the risk of hallucinations, and because of the risk that you might actually write something copyrighted that these models have the capability of producing sometimes. So we have to have that open conversation of why should we be not using AI in certain ways.
So Jay, we lost you for a second a little while back. Did you want to finish your thought?
No, and I mean, gosh, I've got nothing to add to what Nikita just said, because that was about 1,000% spot on in terms of what the industry needs to be doing right now. I can't think of a single thing to add. It was just totally spot on, Nikita.
Okay. So I think when ChatGPT came up live and people started using it not too long ago, President Biden came out with some executive orders to try to put some guardrails about AI. And of course, I think people are trying to catch up because the internet got ahead of people 25 odd years ago. So what do we think of certain regulations for AI? Should there be regulations coming from people that, once again, might not understand the tech, or are regulations needed? Whoever wants to kick it off, it's good.
So I think that regulations are needed. I don't know what those regulations are. I certainly do not purport to be smart enough in the technical space for that. But something you did mention, Joe Biden and the government. I think that this issue that we are talking about now as journalists is really going to explode in the coming months around the election. Like, there's going to be a lot of AI generated misinformation that is out there. There's going to be, you're going to get phone calls from the local mayor that says, hey, guess what? The polls are staying open an extra day. So don't worry, you can vote tomorrow. Like, these are the things that I know groups are working on. It is scary that this is probably what we will be experiencing in November. But if there is any silver lining, I think it will supercharge the policy discussion and bring in more folks, and hopefully the general public will realize how important this is and hold their elected officials accountable for creating sound public policy around this issue.
Yeah, I would agree, Zach. I do think that we have an opportunity to learn our lesson from Section 230 and the social platforms. I don't have an answer to this, but I think that there's an object lesson in social media and in the platforms that we can be thinking about this kind of transformative technology differently than we did before. And I think that there is a way that you can look at this and go, okay, I don't think that trust us is probably the most effective way to regulate transformative, massive trillion-dollar technologies. I don't think it's ever worked as far as I know, it's never worked in human history. That trust us, everything's going to work out okay is probably the best way to go about it. We don't We don't allow our airlines to operate unregulated. And, you know, the stakes are at least as high as getting in an airplane. I mean, when you think about it, I think it's one of those things that we really need to think about. I'm not a public policy expert, but I would be in favor of reasonable, sane regulation around how this technology is used.
Also, when we say AI, it's such a broad thing. It's like saying the entire transportation industry. Like, what policies do we have for the entire transportation industry, which includes everything from airlines to a boat to cars on the road, and they have different ways in which things are regulated. What I see with AI, especially, is currently there is no policy or law around people who are using AI for the bad purposes. So with 11 labs or like all of these tools, as Zachary was saying, you can impersonate people's voices, but that's a technology that could also be used for good in terms of like translating a particular podcast into a different language. But the bad use case is to fake somebody's voice and tell them and spread misinformation. And I see the people who are using these tools should be the people who should be liable for the bad use cases. And there needs to be a lot of laws in place to prevent that from happening. And that's one of the things I'm thinking we should be thinking a lot more about regulations. I'm really worried about deepfakes, worried about the impact on the harassment that women, especially women leaders, women journalists, are going to be facing as a result of this. There's so many bad things that this technology is currently already being used for at such ease. And so those are the different ways, but we don't have just even like deepfake laws, a lot of that protecting people. And it's not something like there's there nationally. And those are the conversations, especially right now. How are we going to make sure that these bad actors are just not wanting to do it because there are such huge repercussions, because currently there isn't anything.
And I would add that a lot of when it comes to what's going to happen in November, I think that it'll be a lot of foreign state actors that regulation might they don't care about that. So I think the government can definitely be doing or should be doing a better job of incentivizing the private sector to find tools to combat this. I think that's the role or a role of the public sector is to spur innovation. And Jay mentioned that we don't want to repeat some of what happened with the big tech platforms. And if you look at kind of how the business model of local news organizations has developed, part of the challenges we're facing now is that we just started giving content away, right? And we did not ask for compensation from anybody, whether it was the readers or the tech platforms that were driving all their ad dollars based on this content that they were using from the news organizations. So we are sitting as journalists and newsrooms on a treasure trove of data, and we cannot just give it away to these AI companies right now. Like, we need to make sure that they are paying for it so that we can, as news organizations, afford and to keep the lights on and pay journalists to do the work that they're doing and all the different expenses that come with having a newsroom. Like, it is not just the salaries of the journalists. It's there's a whole apparatus around the newsroom that keeps it going. So we should not. We need to be cautious about giving away our content for training.
If we could end on a up note, positive note on something, one of the questions is how, about jobs. People talk about job loss, but let's talk maybe just quickly go around quickly how maybe AI can, I don't want to say save jobs, but make people, there are jobs in journalism, and AI is a tool that will help, I guess, ease the job market in some fashion. Does anybody see it that way? You see it differently?
I mean, I think it could open up the door to people that, as Jay and Nikita have said, like maybe they like reporting but don't like writing, and now they have a tool to help them with writing. So there's a universe, or the universe of potential journalists has just expanded to intellectually curious people is like the most important thing. And there are probably a ton of intellectually curious people out there who can't write to save their life, so journalism wasn't an option for them. But now it's much more of an option. So hopefully it expands the pool of potential hires in this field.
And to add to that, there's also now like a whole beat on AI, and a lot of these newsrooms are spinning out AI teams that are bringing together editors, AI product managers, all doing that. So there are a lot more jobs in terms of that AI is bringing about. I think we will be seeing a transition, like a transformation on the roles in the newsrooms because of AI. But I am quite hopeful that we'll be able to, AI will help newsrooms do a lot more, and as a result, we might also see a lot of smaller newsrooms pop up for local news. So that's one of my hopes as well.
Yeah, I would echo that, Nikita, because I think if you think of AI as sort of, if you use my colleague's term as sort of the ultimate intern, if you think of the impact that has, if you have a 2-person newsroom and each one of those people are literate and frequent users of Gen AI as an ethical assistant, the way, using the best practices that Nikita outlined and Zach outlined, that is a transformative impact on a 2-person newsroom. I mean, it alters their ability to see ambition and the kinds of stories that they can cover and the speed in which that they can cover them. And so I think those smaller newsrooms are going to be impacted in a positive, are much more likely to be impacted in a very positive way, because there's nothing but upside. If it's used in the best use cases, there's really, it's almost pure upside. I will say, like, having worked with a lot of large and medium-sized newsrooms over the last few years, I'm really heartened by the way that managers and executives are thinking about this tool and the way that they're talking about this tool for their newsroom. I have had exactly, in the last 4 or 5 years, I have had exactly 0 conversations with decision-making, hiring, shot callers in news organizations who have said, "Oh, I'm loving this because I'm going to reduce headcount by 15%. Like, I've had 0 of those conversations. And there's been lots of opportunities where those conversations could have come up, or where that would have been the direction that it's going. I've kind of been heartened by the attitude of news leaders across the country in terms of how they see the importance of trying to strengthen their newsrooms and bring to bear this technology that is in service of their communities and their reporters and their newsrooms. It's been, I mean, honestly, it's been a little surprising, but I've been glad to see it. It's been a development that I've been glad to see.
Okay, thank you very much to our panelists, Jay Allred, Zach Richner, and Nikita Roy, and thank everybody who's joined us. This is Jeff Bessen from the Press Club of Long Island. Good night.